explain to me one thing the last time you watched something?
I'd like to
about
call
Joe?
the February 6, 2024 regular meeting of council. It's hereby called to order. Councilman Krieger will give the invocation tonight.
Heavenly Father, we thank Thee for this day. Help us to use good judgment for the business at hand, and guide us in wisdom with a continuing sense of truth and fairness for the community we represent.
Thank you. Julie, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Krieger?
Here.
Mr. Marne?
Here.
Mr. Blake?
Here.
Mr. Donovan?
Here.
Mrs. Dowling? Here. Mr. Freeman?
Here.
Mr. Kirchner?
Here. Council, you are in receipt of the minutes from the January 9th, 2024 organizational meeting. What's your pleasure?
Move to approve. Second.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes. So tonight, public hearings, we have none. Tabled legislation, we have none. New legislation, ordinance number 24-0-012. Julie?
An ordinance approving a corrected zoning map and declaring an emergency.
I'll turn to Mr. Zeman for explanation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of council. Some years ago, when the zoning map was revised, as you know, if you go back in time, the older maps, the district boundaries could be a little bit fuzzy. As they've gotten better and better, higher resolution, and we get down to a parcel-by-parcel ability to view the zoning map, an error was discovered on the last approval, and it's for, I won't read the whole parcel number, but we've identified it. It turns out that the shading was incorrect on that revision. That parcel is actually zoned R2, but it shows up as shaded B2 on the incorrect version of the map. Again, administration's gone through the records. It's very, very clear that that parcel is and has always been zoned R2. So this is just a clerical error that occurred. Again, it doesn't affect the current use. There was a question as to, well, why is there commercial parking lot on it? Mr. Rastetter, who's got great institutional memory with the city of Mentor, pointed out that the old district regulations allowed for commercial parking on some residential lots. So that's the reason it was developed in that way, and might be the reason that when the shading was re-examined, when the map was revised, it was believed that that was commercial and not residential. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you, Joe. Council, what's your pleasure?
Move to suspend. Second.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes. Move to approve. Second.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Ordinance number 24-0-012 has been approved. Moving on to ordinance number 24-0-013. Julie?
An ordinance to authorize transfers of funds, advances of funds, and revisions to appropriations and declaring an emergency.
Ken?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Malinowski, please.
Thank you, Mr. Filipiak, members of the council. This ordinance does three things. Firstly, it authorizes a permanent cash transfer out of the city's general fund to cover the Marsh Public Access Project. That would be the city share. And then secondly, there are two temporary cash advances also out of the city's general fund, and those are to cover both a state grant fund and a federal grant fund, as noted in the legislation. And then finally, in Section 3, there are several appropriation revisions, almost all increases, one decrease. I would recommend approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Council?
Move to suspend.
Second.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes. Move to approve.
Second.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Yes. Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Ordinance number 24-0-013 has been approved. Next is ordinance number 24-0-014.
An ordinance reaffirming the designation of city-owned permanent parcels 35A 006 000 001 35A006-000-0080, 35A006-000-0090, and 35A006-000-0130 as a conservation parkland, directing the city manager to continue planning efforts in furtherance of their conservation, establishing police and sanitary regulations for the properties, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Julie. This seems to be a debated topic, so to start with, I'm going to have 4 speakers come up, 4 pages that I got. I think most everybody's from Painesville. So I'm going to start with Mr. Derek Abbey. Sir, you'll have 4 minutes. If you'd like to come up to the podium, give your name, address, and if all 4 speakers could try to not be redundant, say what you have to say and try not to repeat yourself would be great. But Mr. Abbey, you're on.
Good evening, Honorable Council. On the behalf of Painesville City Council, I am Derek Abney. My microphone went off.
And your address?
My address is 730 Ariston Court, Painesville, Ohio.
Thank you.
On the behalf of Painesville City Council, I am Derek Abney, council member, and I am the chairman of the city's Economic Development Committee. I am here tonight to express our concern regarding the proposed legislation number 24-0-014, which seeks to put 215 acres in Painesville city limits into conservation. This would destroy our economic development plans and future job creation for the site off of Brookstone Boulevard. First, I would like to address the elephant in the room. The message this legislation sends to Painesville is that our zoning laws, our urban planning, and our previous agreements that we made with Mentor in good faith appear to mean very little to the council. My mother always told me, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should always just do it. Admittedly, there is a long history on both sides when it comes to this area. While I was not, and I repeat, I was not on council at the time when all this happened, I would like to list some facts to emphasize why the proposed ordinance is not sound public policy. 1, in the terms of these 215 acres being placed in conservation, the damage such policy does economically to Painesville and the region far outweighs any perceived environmental concerns. The quality of the wetlands at the sites have been deemed low. The lands have been delineated, and the 3-year extension was provided by the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers at the request of the city of Mentor. This is not a protected area. It is sandwiched between the intersection of 2 state routes, and there is no valid environmental reason why this site could not be developed. Second, the actual economic damage in Painesville and Lake County is measurable in the terms of hundreds of jobs lost. The elimination of the 150-plus acre job site with full utilities available. As noted by the NAACP, the loss of the local employment opportunities for our diverse sensory and the loss of millions of dollars in real property taxes impacting Riverside local school districts, the city of Painesville, and Lake County. My final point is, last year, we gave the blessings of our city manager to come over here and ask about a 50-50 jet agreement, which has the potential to conservatively generate $4.7 million in income tax revenue for Mentor over the next 20 years. In addition, Mentor will gain millions of dollars in profit from the sale of the land. Easy revenue that solves the funding issues for all of Mentor's traffic concerns and then puts an end to this long-standing dispute between the cities. How can this not be in the best interest for Mentor? Respectfully,
Mr. Abbey, you have 15 seconds.
Respectfully, on the behalf of Painesville City and its residents, I want to thank you for giving me the time to come to this microphone and address you in your chambers. But we ask you just to reconsider this legislation, please, on the
Thank you,
behalf
Mr. Abbey.
of our residents.
Thank you. Jim Fedor. If you could come to the podium and provide your name and address, and you have 4 minutes as well.
Starting now?
Starting now.
Kidding. My name is Jim Fodor, and I am Painesville City's Council President this year, elected in January. So it's kind of interesting because tonight, kind of on the other side of the table. So like Derek said, we're very thankful to have this opportunity to come to talk to council. I think it's important that while we're here is that we put a name and a face together. We're neighbors, we should know each other, we should be working together for each other's benefits. This parcel of land is very unique because it's in Painesville City, it's owned by Mentor, and it's the Riverside School District tax place. Now, there's 3 entities there that have a dog in the race, so to speak, with this land. And if you look at it, that's probably close to 100,000 people that this parcel of land could have an effect on as we look at the economic development that is going to take place in the next several years. So again, on behalf of Painesville City Council, extending the hand out there, let's see, you have 7 intelligent people sitting on your council. We have 7 on ours. Maybe the 14 of us can get together, put our heads together, figure out and be good role models on how maybe a conflict situation can be worked out to the benefit of really 3 different entities and probably close to 100,000 people. And thank you for the opportunity to speak tonight.
Thank you, sir. Next up, we have Douglas Lewis. Come to the podium, name, address, just like everyone else.
Good evening, President Blake and City Council. My name is Doug Lewis. I am the city manager for the city of Painesville, and I live at 843 Homewood Drive, Painesville, Ohio. As you have already heard, the proposed legislation will be very detrimental to the city of Painesville, Riverside School District, and the region as a whole, including Mentor. Not only would this affect future development in the city of Painesville and Lake County, but it will also jeopardize the proposed State Route 44 Jackson Street interchange, which we have worked on for many years. I've stated publicly that I would not retire until that interchange goes in, so I certainly hope we can come to some type of resolution. I am standing before you to say that we want to work with you. We continue to be at the table and would like to see this resolved in the interest of all parties. And I believe that can occur. Thank you for your consideration again. We are at the table and we're not going away. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. And so next up is a familiar name, Tony Zampedro, our former assistant city manager here in Mentor. Hello, Tony. How are you?
Good, John. Congratulations on the presidency.
Thank you. Thank you.
I did want to clear one thing up. I did struggle earlier tonight. I had my Painesville pin on and took it off, and I had my old Mentor pin and I put it on. So then I put them both on, and I took them both off because I decided I'm just coming here tonight as a longtime Mentor resident. And I wanted to talk about sort of the issue here in front of council.
Don't forget your address. Name
Yes,
and
thank you. 9286 Thomas Court, Mentor, Ohio.
And your name?
Anthony Zampedro.
Thank you.
So, as I said, I'm here tonight as a longtime Mentor resident and not the assistant city manager of Painesville or the retired assistant city manager of Mentor. I do want to congratulate council on a first-class recreation center that was created here in town. I joined it in the new year. I use it a lot. It's wonderful. I do know it came at a cost to taxpayers of $7 million plus, but money well spent. Springbrook Park, myself, my kids use it all the time. Again, fantastic facility, cost $8 million. And I certainly understand that Parks and Rec have been busy the last 2 years with one of the biggest budgets in their history and amongst the various cities' departments. So we're spending a lot of money for a lot of good things. As a resident, I appreciate that. Read the other day that Mentor just landed a foreign venture to the Matchworks building as a result of the International Trade Initiative, so congratulations to Councilman Ray. That's a real feather in the cap. You had the work session earlier about a massive potential for economic development on the Bolton estate finally. Beautiful 238-acre estate. So a lot's happening in Mentor, a lot of very positive things, which sort of lead me as a citizen to sort of wonder why would council consider harming the region around it by locking down one of the most important economic development sites in Painesville for conservation purposes. As stewards of the Mentor City Treasury, how can it make sense to pass up the opportunity to realize millions of dollars on behalf of your citizens with the outright sale of that property for development? I've struggled to understand the sense that it makes to reject a lucrative JED arrangement wherein Mentor would get 50% of all the income tax generated there for at least over 20 years, and that deal alone being worth $4.7 million. So there's $7 million easily here in this arrangement. So I've worked for Mentor for 16 years and often heard this council, and almost every one of you say, run the city like a business. So I wonder what business is making the decision you're making to pass up the lucrative arrangement and put shallow, fallow scrubland into a conservancy located next to 2 and 44 in the pocket there. I mean, it sort of defies explanation. So, I mean, if you could use those funds to pay for the rec center, wouldn't you do it? If you could use it to pay for Springbrook Park, wouldn't you do it? Or even just to pave more roads. So I could go on and on about what that money could be used for, and it's a significant amount. But again, as stewards of the public treasury, there's a duty to the residents to make sound financial decisions. Passing up $7 million in order to place low-quality scrubland in conservation doesn't seem like a prudent act, especially when it's going to economically harm your neighbors. So having known everybody here for many years, I surely hope council will, in the end, do the right thing for everybody involved. I mean, I just really implore you to be reasonable. And that's really all I had to say. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. Zampedro. At this time, I'd like to have our Law Director, Joe Zeman, comment on this ordinance. Joe?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of council. Before you tonight is an ordinance which accomplishes two goals for the city. I want to talk a little bit briefly about the second of those, which is the establishment of police and sanitary regulations. We call it the Shamrock property. It's probably time to give it a new name, but I'll use that as shorthand tonight. As you know, it has not, since the city acquired title, been open to the public. That doesn't necessarily mean that members of the public don't decide to go back there. People probably think it's a hill, but it's actually a large spoil pile that's visible from Route 2. If you drive by there now, you can see it's still some tire ruts up it. So people are doing illegal things on our property up there, and it's time that the city more directly address that. So a high revised code, even though the property is owned by the city of Mentor and the city of Painesville, it allows the council to establish police and sanitation regulations which we can directly enforce and actually charge violators here in the Mentor Municipal Court. So obviously we want to make sure that the property is secured from trespass, any other types of activities, setting fires, improper hunting or fishing, and there's a few that are specified. I won't go through them. I think they're fairly straightforward in terms of refuse disposal and stuff. So that's sort of an important housekeeping item to allow us to make sure that this property is secured and properly managed. As to the second aspect of it, I think maybe there's a little misunderstanding. This is not a conservation easement that is proposed. In other words, we're not granting a property interest to any third party that would therefore, as they say, place it in, quote, conservation. It has been used for conservation, for preservation purposes, since we acquired title to it. The manager, pursuant to charter and code of ordinances, and his staff have been doing exactly that out there, doing what's minimally necessary or perhaps a little bit in addition to make sure that the property is currently preserved. That, though, is sort of something that people don't quite understand. They don't really understand the role of the manager in a council manager form of government and his authority to do that. And it seems to be some assumption out there that the property is for sale. It hasn't been, as the council knows. It's never been for sale. It isn't for sale now. There is no development plan for it. The city acquired it. It holds it in the public trust as public lands for purposes of preservation at current. And the intent is to continue that into the future. So, as the council is aware, the manager has been looking at potential opportunities there, grant funding, whatever else, to try to position that property for preservation. If you look at some old photos prior to it being clear cut, there was actually a lot of standing timber out there. So it was not necessarily in the past in the condition that you now see it currently. So this doesn't really change anything. It just clarifies its exact legal status that has always existed. And it's just to try to get that misunderstanding out of the out there in the public, so that everyone understands the city's goals for the property is not to sell it, it's not to do anything with it currently, or in the foreseeable future again. So it clears up all of those misconceptions. It does not change the status quo. In the absence of this ordinance, that status quo would remain as well. But again, I recommend its adoption by council in order to clarify those issues. In terms of economic development and our friends and neighbors in Paynesville here tonight expressing those concerns, again, there is no development plan in place. The legal matter that was resolved some years ago did not stipulate that Mentor would do anything specifically with the property. If there were assumptions on anyone's part relative to what Mentor may do with it, that's their assumption. So there is no legal necessity that the city sell it or develop it or enter into a JED or any of those things. So be happy to answer any more specific questions, Mr. President. Thank you, members of council.
Mr. President?
Yes.
Thanks, Commission. For the law director, this ordinance, does it prevent anything from changing in the future, or is this something that we can put this in place for the reasons you stated now?
Right.
And there could be changes up the road by ordinance?
On a long enough timeline, obviously, things do change. So if this council, some years from now, or a future council decides that the property is not needed for any public purpose and wants to place it up for sale, they can do that at that time. Sure.
Okay. Thank you.
Council. Ken, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Probably just comment on some of the comments that were made from our friends in Paynesville. We strive to maintain good relations with our neighbors, and because we do rely on each other for support. We are a region, a county, and that applies to everything from public safety to the economy. Sometimes our interests may be at odds, and those can be honest disagreements. I think the law director said it quite adequately and well in terms of what this legislation is looking to accomplish. I will say that when we talk about supporting one another as neighbors, when I read the statement that was released earlier by the city of Paynesville, where it says that the latest legislation joins a long list of aggressive attacks over the last 20 years by the city of Mentor, I think that's a misrepresentation of the type of relationship we've tried to have. It's our responsibility to pursue all alternatives with the assets that the city holds, whether that's land or monetary resources. It's our job to look at what the interests of our city residents are first. We certainly don't want them to come as at the expense of another community or any individual. But it's our job to look at policy options and present them to this council. In the absence of that, our city has a long, long history of treating public lands as conservation areas. Every one of your public parks, every one of your public holdings are actually zoned for conservation within this city. We've got a long history of supporting conservation projects. Mr. San Pedro mentioned the purchase of Springbrook Park, which saved that from more intensive development. We just finished a significant project with the Two-Town Stream restoration is another, added many, many acres of wetland and, a project that directly helps the environment. Probably the largest project in Lake County's history in terms of environmental impact was the restoration of the salt tailings dump site, which was over a $12–13 million project benefiting the Mentor Marsh. So we look at these things not strictly from the lens of dollars and cents, but dollars and cents for sure, but also in terms of being good stewards of the environment and in terms of looking at what the potential costs that we would incur from developments going forward. So, as Mr. Zeman said, while there's no immediate project or development plan in sight, I think what you're doing is relatively consistent with what you have done with all public lands up to this point. And, we're happy to continue conversations with our friends in Painesville. I just hope we can do that without turning up the rhetoric.
Thank you, Council.
Mr. President,
Yes, Scott.
as the guests from Painesville discussed, and it was brought up that there's been a lot of, say, disagreement slash conflict with our neighbors over this particular area of land for 20 years probably, since I've been on council. Ray to test, Mark's been here since, what, 06, his first time. And when this was building up with the developer at the time, both sides were looking for a settlement. At that time, we discussed moving forward with a settlement, and I was able to go back and research, and that took place on May 29th, 2019. And that was to give our law director the authority to go ahead and proceed with some type of settlement. At that time, I was outvoted 5-1 because the rumor was that we were going to receive that land. And I said, well, what are we going to do with land sitting in Painesville? Are we going to be able to develop it? Are we going to be able to sell it? What are we going to do with it? Fast forward to when the agreement came down, when we did decide to put away our differences and settle, it was 2020. And once again, I was outvoted 6-1. And part of the reason for the development agreement was to take the land so it helped control our traffic and we didn't have to spend money on Diamond Center. Once again, I said, what are we going to do with the land? I'm not going to sit on land that we can't do something with. Does us no good. I was outvoted 6-1. So fast forward 2 years ago, Mr. Donovan was president, I was vice. I've been head of the Economic Development Committee that Mark and I started back in 06. I said, let's try to move forward and break the ice with Painesville and come up with some type of agreement so that we could work together, all benefit from it. Because not only does Mentor benefit from it, Painesville benefits, but all of Lake County benefits from it. Property sits bordered to Route 2, border Route 44, with hopefully an interchange going in that should have been, in my opinion, 20, 30 years ago, in 2027. Jim, you were at the meeting. We had 2 meetings with you and Christine. And let's just say it was a little bit pretentious at first, I guess, for lack of better words, a little bit, conflict because, this first time it's ever been done in a long time. And we both came away with, hey, we got to do what's best for Painesville, let's do what's best with Mentor, and let's do what's best for Lake County as a whole. And that's when we started working on a proposed JED, which turned out to be, which was given to us at 50%. When it comes to economic development, we're always talking about the same two problems that Mentor has. One's a good problem, and that's this, we don't have enough space to do all the things that we want to do or we need to do. The other one's a little bit harder of a problem, and that's reinstituting, rejuvenating, let's say, a distressed area. First thing that comes up whenever I'm somewhere is what's going on at the mall. Then they talk about how great Springbrook Gardens is. They talk about how great the rec center is. But it's always what's going on with the mall. And by working together and doing something with Painesville, especially if Painesville, the way I look at it, is going to do all the work and we're going to receive 50% of the revenues, how's that not a win? So I'm all about economic development, as I've always been. I'm all about helping Painesville, helping us, of course. That's what my oath is to this city. But also, it's what's most important to all of Lake County. So by looking at this issue, I'm not in favor of moving forward this now. For the main reason is that when we had our meetings and Painesville seemed ready to go, there wasn't a lot of urgency on this side of the block, in my opinion, about trying to work something out. We had 2 quick executive sessions on it. I wanted to talk to Mr. President Sean Blake and Vice President John Krieger about this last week, and lo and behold, the day after, received a phone call from Mr. Krieger that this was moving forward. So I will not be in support of this at this time. I want to use this as an opportunity to move forward and do what's best for all parties involved. And hopefully, we can make the next 20, 25 years a lot better than we made the last 20, 25 years. Thank you.
Well, Ken, I think before we go to a vote on this, what I realized by reading this and looking at this from many different angles is that tomorrow nothing changes. The property's still there. We're not changing its designation really with this. We're just classifying it as a public use. So down the line, future councils or, different things could be done. So with that, council?
Move to suspend.
Second.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
No.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
No.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
So I think this will be read again in 2 weeks. We cannot suspend the rule. So we'll put this on for a second reading on the 20th. Okay, moving on. Ordinance number 24-0-015.
An ordinance accepting and authorizing the city manager to enter into a grant agreement with the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council for the 2024 Energized Community Grant Program and to perform all actions necessary to accept grant funds.
Ken?
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. Schweikert, please.
Thank you. For the 6th consecutive year, the City of Mentor is eligible to receive a grant through the Northeast Ohio Public Energy Council's Energized Community Grant. The 2024 grant will be $104,729. This amount is based on the total number of residents that utilize the NOPAC program for natural gas and electric. Passage of this legislation will authorize the city manager to enter into the 2024 grant agreement. These funds are intended to be used for energy-saving projects only. Past uses of these funds include new boilers for the pools at the Civic Center and Morton Parks, along with new exterior windows at the police department. A likely use of these funds will be for energy-saving infrastructure upgrades at the rec facility. Thank you.
Council?
Move to suspend.
Second.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes, move to approve.
Second.
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirchner?
Yes.
Ordinance number 24-0-015 has been approved. Next is ordinance number 24-0-016.
An ordinance authorizing the city manager to enter into a contract with Classic Ford for the purchase of 3 2024 Ford F-250 pickup trucks.
Ken?
Thank you. Mr. Schweikert, please.
Thank you. The Department of Public Works requests to purchase 3 Ford F-250 pickup trucks as part of our routine vehicle and equipment replacement program. These trucks are a mainstay of our fleet and are used in a wide array of maintenance and construction activities. They are also essential for plowing the 400 cul-de-sacs that exist in the city. The 3 trucks being replaced are on average more than 18 years old. Valley Ford Truck Center has a state contract for a Ford F-250 at a price of $47,574 each. Classic Ford, however, has agreed to sell us the same vehicle for $47,479, a savings of $95 per truck. Thus, it is my recommendation that we purchase these 3 trucks for a combined price of $142,437 from Classic Ford.
Thank you, Matt. Council?
Move to suspend.
Second?
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes. Move to approve.
Second?
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Ordinance number 24-0-016 has been approved. Next is ordinance number 24-0-017.
An ordinance to revise the codified ordinances of the City of Mentor, January 2024 as amended by adopting current replacement pages and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Zeman?
Yes, Mr. President, members of council, these are really just the publication pages for some of your various changes, municipal income tax code, feeding Canada geese, and a few other miscellaneous things. So I would recommend adoption. Thank you.
Thank you. Council?
Move to suspend.
Second?
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling? Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes. Move to approve.
Second?
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Ordinance number 24-0-017 has been approved. Next is ordinance number 24-0-018.
An ordinance awarding and authorizing the city manager to execute a bid contract with Lakeland Management Systems, Inc. for the construction of the Blackbrook Golf Course Storage Facility and declaring an emergency.
And you,
Thank you, Mr. President. Council, on December 18th, 4 bids were received for the construction of the Blackbrook Golf Cart Storage Facility through the Parks and Recreation Department. The bids range from a low bid of $751,744.96 to a high bid of $1,086,500. The low bid was actually received from Engelkey Construction Solutions. However, that bid was found to be out of conformance for a number of reasons. The memo, your staff memo, indicates some of those are significant, including all engineering and architectural services, building insulation, utility connections, and costs associated with future building increases as the project progressed. So we felt that collectively it certainly fell short of the lowest and best bid. So therefore, we are recommending to you the bid of Lakeland Management Systems Incorporated for $835,000. The engineer's opinion of probable cost was $792,000. We ask for your approval.
thank you, Ken. Council,
Move to suspend.
Second?
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes. Move to approve.
Second?
Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Yes.
Ordinance number 24-0-018 has been approved. Second readings, we have none. Third readings, we have none. And manager's report. Ken.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of council. Council contractor Benz LLC has started construction of the Marina Bulkhead Replacement Phase 5 just this past Monday. Approximately 1/2 of the 600 feet of sheet piling has already been installed. The project is expected to be completed by May 1st. The Mentor Senior Center is hosting an open forum on preparing for emergencies offered by the Lake County EMA tomorrow, February 7th, from 10 to 11 a.m. Lake County EMA Director Joseph Bush, a name that you're familiar with, and Deputy Director Joseph Hum will discuss the plans for notification that Lake County has in place and how you can prepare should an emergency occur. After the discussion, EMA staff will be available to assist residents with signing up for the WENS, or the Wireless Emergency Notification System. This event is free of charge and open to those 55 and over. Registration is online or by calling the Mentor Senior Center. And finally, Council, we have several new businesses to announce. Earlier, we had the pleasure of the ribbon cutting at the Matchworks building just last Friday of Block Digital at 8500 Station Street, our new friends from the UK. The Clothing Cottage at 9324 Mentor Avenue. Luxottica of America at 9593 Mentor Avenue. Nocturnal Inc. at 6994 Heisley Road. QC Kinetics at 9500 Mentor Avenue, and Green Star Technologies at 7840 Tyler Boulevard. So we appreciate their investment in our community, and we wish them fantastic success going forward.
Ken, I want to congratulate you and Ray and Kevin Malachek on bringing in Block Digital. That's a company from, where are they from? Derby, England?
Derby, England.
And that is a product of your outbound international program. And I was proud and happy to be at the ribbon cutting. Very impressive, that company. So congratulations to you guys. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Mr. President. And while we appreciate that, I also want to thank Council for being supportive of this program. Most communities, almost no communities, have the willingness to put in the long-term commitment that it requires to make this work, but it can pay off. I know we have Commissioner Regovich in the audience here today as well, and Commissioner Hamercheck, I understand, and also want to thank them because they've been a strong supporter of our program for a number of years, and we couldn't do it without their support.
And I know you guys sometimes go through hardship when you're overseas. I know you've thrown out your back, and Ray, you've done things to yourself, and so, thank you. Thank you for that. Hope to see more in the future. So, okay, moving on, clerk's correspondence. Julie?
Council is in receipt of the Mentor Municipal Court December 2023 month-end report. And that is all.
Thank you. Commission committee reports. Council, you're in receipt of Municipal Planning Commission from December 7th, 2023, and Board of Building and Zoning Appeals from December 12th, 2023. Old business?
Mr. President?
Yes, Janet.
Not sure if this would be considered old business, but it's a few months old. Question for Mr. Filipiak. I was contacted by a resident that lives in the southwest part of Mentor that was greatly impacted by the tornado. She was requesting if there are any programs in place to help with replacing the devastation of the large old trees. I mean, she realizes you can't plant a large old tree, but if there are any programs in place to help residents. I discussed with her our tree lawn program, but when it comes to planting in a resident's yard, I didn't know if there was any way we could direct them or if anybody was working on anything to help.
It's a good question. I'm not familiar with anything for reinvesting in a private property. Most of that's not covered by insurance.
Right.
Mr. Schweikert, are you aware of any private funds that might be out there?
Not aware of anything at the moment. I know at times in the past, the Chagrin River Watershed Partners had offered, smaller trees to people. I could certainly, if you wanted to have them, person contact me.
Okay.
I could,
I'll be happy to do that.
at least keep my ears open.
Thank you.
And again, it's worth a reminder that the city is always looking for opportunities to plant new trees on public tree lawns and other public property that might be near or adjacent to private facilities, private homes.
I was able to share that, but on private property, out of the right-of-way, I didn't think that there was much we could do, but I said I would ask. Thank you.
Okay. Any other old business? Moving on to new business. Council, we have a recommendation to make to the Lake County Board of Commissioners for consideration to an appointment to the Lake County Senior Citizens Advisory Panel. Are there any nominations for that position?
Mr. President, I'd like to recommend Mentor resident Emily Koenig to the Lake County Board of Commissioners for consideration of an appointment to the Lake County Senior Citizen Advisory Panel.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Hearing none, Julie, please call the roll.
Mr. Krieger?
Yes.
Mr. Marne?
Yes.
Mr. Blake?
Yes.
Mr. Donovan?
Yes.
Mrs. Dowling?
Yes.
Mr. Freeman?
Yes.
Mr. Kirschner?
Okay. So Julie, I'll have you send a letter to Commissioner President Pleshnik advising him of our recommendation. Okay, moving on. Persons before council, I think we got everybody.
Council President, under new business, I had one thing I wanted to say.
Sure, I'm sorry, Jan.
I shared with Councilman Krieger earlier today that Sunday I attended the first event at the Mentor Headlands Community Center following the renovations, and they're very excited about it. It's a huge change, and I can't express strongly enough how nice it would be to see more of the residents that are in. I believe they've, John, could you explain? They've expanded their geographic area a little bit from what it used to be. They were trying to explain that to me.
Well, a little bit for the parking. They expanded that. Everything else was just renovated as far as paint and whatever had to be done to bring it up to code.
Oh, no, I meant the geographic area of what it was to be like a voting member of the community center. They said something about it had moved a little bit down Lakeshore Boulevard or something, and I didn't understand that. and-
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay,
They
I
haven't
thought
passed
maybe-
that on. I'd have to ask
Yeah.
Steve or
But
Jeff
it's,
about
yeah,
that.
it's going to be a beautiful facility for rentals, and on the smaller side, I think up to 100 people it could seat, so it's really nice. And I know that members of the administration worked hard with that group down there, so it was really nice to see.
Very good. Thank you, Jan. Persons before council, I think we got everybody.
Have anybody?
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay.